Okay, so it's time to remove the intake studs. And I'm doing that because I've just put the JB Weld into that little cavity there, and also in behind the oil, where the oil cooler goes. So while I'm waiting for that to set up, which is, well, obviously going to be overnight now, I'm going to keep all the grease away. So I'm going to work on the top end and remove the studs. And what I'm using is this little stud removal kit. So it's an M8 by 1.25 pitch. And the idea is that you tighten down the nut on the collet, and then it gives you just enough pressure so that you can undo enough tension on the stud so you can grab it and undo the stud. So this is a lot easier to remove these intake studs than exhaust studs, because exhaust studs, as you know, are on the hot side and they usually corrode and rust and all sorts of stuff. They get stuck in the aluminium. The intake studs are on the cool side or the cold side, so a lot easier to remove. So that's the first one. I've got obviously 12 to do. I guess I should probably explain why I'm removing the intake studs. So on the SC, the intake runners, the 6 individual intake runners, are quite narrow or quite thin, so they use these normal length studs. But when you switch to a 3.2 Carrera intake, you also have to fit the spacer in between here as well. So I'm going to have a much longer stud to allow for that spacer, and also the barrel nuts that go on top of the intake manifolds. So I'll show you those when I install them. So this is the tool. It's in 2 pieces. I'm not going to be able to show you how I undo it because I've got to hold the camera at the same time, or the phone. But the idea is you push this one, you screw this one down on the stud, and see how it's got a tapered collet. So then now you thread this one on, and it's actually tapered inside at the base there. So the tighter you make it, the more it clamps down on these threads. And then so you lock these two together nice and tight, and then you undo the bottom one here to unscrew the stud. So yeah, I can't even do this one-handed. It's actually quite difficult. Oh, there you go. You can sort of see me winding that on, and now it's made contact. So I'll get 2 spanners out and I'll tighten them down. So that's with the nut locked down, and I just got a long 19mm ratchet, and it's just undoing the stud. This one was actually quite easy to remove. So yep, I'll do this 11 more times. Remove the spark plugs. I just thought I'd just double check how things are running on the engine, and as you can see, they look pretty good, I guess. Nothing too out of the ordinary. Focus. There you go. Obviously I'll be changing to different spark plugs. These are BP6ES. I'll be using the R version because I'm going to EFI, and I think you need to do that with the resistor to make them so there's less electrical interference. Okay, a little bit of an update. I've done all my valve clearances. A couple of them were a little bit loose, which I knew because it was getting a little noisy, a bit tappety. So now what I'm up to is I'm installing the new intake studs for the 3.2 intake. So because the 3.2 manifolds use these big spacers from Turbocraft, or actually they use spacers regardless, you need to use longer intake studs. So I pulled all the studs out, as you know, and then I'm just setting the height of the studs. So these ones are sticking out a little bit further than I need to, but what I've done is I've installed an SC intake gasket on the bottom, so that's as per normal, and then the phenolic spacer goes on. And as you can see, the bottom of it is actually stepped, and the idea of this is it's designed to clear the intake shroud, you know, the fiberglass fan shroud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick these all on and just make sure that it actually does do that. But yeah, so I'm just setting the height. So I've got gasket there, spacer goes on, and then what do I do with that other gasket? Shit. Oh, here it is. Then you use the gasket from a 3.2 intake manifold, which is designed to clear the injector. And then the intake manifold goes on, like that. And then, as you know, these 3.2 intakes, they use these barrel nuts. So this one's sticking out a little bit further. These ones are in about as far as they go. Now, normally these use a very thick 3mm washer, but I think I'm probably not going to use those on this one. I'll use some thin spring wavy washers or spring washers. But without the washer, you can just see that the, where is that? Oh, there it is. You can just sort of see that the top of the stud is just near the bottom of the recess. So you need to make sure that there's enough of a recess inside so that the Allen key can actually get in there and tighten it. So I'll probably put that stud in just a little bit further than it is, because by the time you tighten everything down and compress the gaskets on both sides, I think it'll go down a little bit further. And the spring washer is going to add almost nothing to the height. And the reason why I'm not going to use the thick washers is because I haven't got these studs going in as far into the heads as I normally would. So to give you an idea, I'll pull that off so that you can see. So you can see there's still a bit of stud material sticking out. So I'll probably go in a little bit further. So that's pretty much my height there. So I'll use a vernier and I'll measure exactly how much is protruding, and that'll be my height. Now the other thing about these intake spaces, these ones from Turbocraft, is because these are designed for a 930, which, as you know, they have the tiny intake ports, which is what that is. That's a very, very small intake port. My verniers, I dropped them. So I've cracked the plastic screen, which is a shame. But to give you an idea, if I can just do this one-handed, that port, I think it's 34 millimeters. Oh, 32. So that's only 32, just under 32 millimeters. And my ports are actually 37 or 38. They've actually, someone's been in here before and they look like they've taped them out a little bit just to the tops. I mean, right at the top it sort of goes out to 40, 41 mil, which is very much the same as a 3.2 intake. But these are the typical big port heads, which are meant to be a 38 or a 39 millimeter intake. But either way, what I'll do is I'll just use the, well, I guess this is what I'll do. I'll use this is what I've traced. If I get an SC gasket and put it between the holes, I can sort of trace the circle, and then I'll just flip it around and do the same thing. And then I just got to use a Dremel tool and just blend it so that the bottom meets the top. So the top side is actually the right, I'm pretty sure that's the right dimension. Yeah. So the top is the exact correct dimension for the 3.2 manifold. So I just have to Dremel it out a little bit on the bottom just to blend the port. So that's what I've got to do now. And then yeah, so I'm slowly making progress. The other thing I'm not 100% sure of is because I know these are actually a little bit thicker than standard 3.2 intakes, so I'm not 100% sure of the difference in the relationship between the throttle plate that's going to mount here with the actuator arm that reaches up to the throttle body. So I may need to either lengthen or shorten that throttle arm. I think I'm going to have to lengthen it or shim it up. You know, I might need to put a couple of shims in here or a couple of washers under here so that the throttle plate sits up just that fraction taller, and so that the throttle actually has the correct movement. But yeah, that's where I'm at so far. So I've just given the intake shroud or the engine shroud a bit of a clean and a degrease, and I've removed the wiring harness because I'll have to make a custom one. And I thought I'd just see how these spacers work. And I tell you what, this little two-piece spacer that are made by Turbocraft are brilliant. Like, look at this. Perfectly seats onto the heads of the 3 litre, and then this part here overlaps the shroud so that you don't have to alter it, because if you try to fit a 3.2 intake onto these heads, even using the 3.2 spacers, you'll find that the base of the intake actually interferes with the shroud and you have to trim it, which means if you, for any reason, if you ever go back to the stock 3 litre CIS for whatever reason, they won't seal again. Not as well anyway. So yeah, these spacers are perfect, and if you look at that, like, the height is pretty much spot on. So when you drop these on, and don't forget I haven't got a gasket on there, so I'll probably be another millimetre or so up. But yeah, they clear the shroud perfectly. So yep, very happy with that. Worth the money. They're not cheap. But then again, they've put all the design into it and all the R&D, and they get them made. So yeah, all I need to do now is Dremel these out to blend. So there's the marks I need to Dremel out just to blend it with the other side, and then I'll be ready to start fitting things up. Cool. And that's just to show you the 3.2 intakes fitted on top of the Phenolic spacers. So you can see where they clear the 3 litre shroud, and plenty of room for a washer and a nut. Oh, don't forget I have to put the gaskets on there, so that'll take up some of the thread, but yeah, that's how it's going to look pretty much. Starting to take shape. Okay, just a little quick update. So I've had the spacers, what do you call them, routed out. So now they've been widened out, so they now fit the heads quite well. And I've just got these mocked up, just a couple of nuts. I've got the bottom gasket, can't see it in there, got the bottom gasket, the spacer, and then the top gasket. Then the 3.2 intakes. The studs were protruding from the heads, I think from memory 37mm, so that gave me perfect length. And as you can see, the stud is just at the bottom of the recess for the hex. Yeah, so the 3.2 intake's mounted. I've mounted my, I don't have a 3.2 throttle bell crank, but I do have obviously my stock 3 litre SC one, and obviously I've mounted the, don't worry about the cat hair, that hasn't been cleaned out, that's just sitting there. But I just wanted to see where I am in terms of throttle linkages, and it looks like I'm gonna have to make this one a little bit longer, which shouldn't be too hard. But yeah, I'm pretty certain that with the 3.2 bell crank, these do sit higher up, and I'm wondering if that's to give them a better clearance around here, because that rod is actually on an angle, as you can see in the video there. Yeah, so this is where I'm at now. I'm sort of starting the mock-up, or starting to put things on stage. With the throttle body, I haven't done it yet, but I'll pull this apart and I'll give it a good clean. And then this is the wide open switch, which the 3.2 Carrera uses, so all of this will be removed. And I have an adapter to mount on there for the throttle position sensor, the TPS. So hopefully I'll start playing with that tomorrow. Yeah, it's starting to look good.